In the early hours of the 3rd of January, 2026, the United States carried out a dramatic military operation in Venezuela that it says led to the detention of President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, an event that immediately sent shockwaves through global politics. The operation, which U.S. officials described as swift and highly targeted, marked one of the most consequential U.S. interventions in Latin America in decades and reopened long-standing debates about sovereignty, international law, and the limits of American power abroad. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and share. Thanks. According to statements from Washington, the decision to strike Venezuela did not emerge suddenly but followed years of deteriorating relations, failed diplomatic efforts, and escalating accusations against the Maduro government. U.S. authorities have long alleged that Maduro and senior members of his administration were deeply involved in drug trafficking and corruption, claims that resulted in criminal indictments filed in U.S. courts. American officials argue that these allegations were not symbolic but reflected what they described as a transformation of Venezuela into a narco-state, where criminal networks allegedly operated with protection from the highest levels of government. The United States also cited Venezuela's prolonged economic collapse as a central factor behind the intervention. Once one of Latin America's wealthiest nations due to its vast oil reserves, Venezuela has endured years of hyperinflation, currency devaluation, and the breakdown of basic public services. Hospitals have struggled to function, food and medicine shortages have become widespread, and millions of Venezuelans have fled the country, creating one of the largest migration crises in the world. U.S. officials argued that the instability was no longer a purely domestic issue but a regional problem affecting neighboring countries and, increasingly, the United States itself. Sanctions have been Washington's primary tool for pressuring the Venezuelan government for years, targeting oil exports, financial institutions, and top officials. While the U.S. maintains its sanctions were designed to force political reforms and negotiations, critics say they worsen the suffering of ordinary Venezuelans. Despite periodic talks and international mediation efforts, the political deadlock persisted, and the U.S. administration ultimately concluded that economic and diplomatic pressure alone would not dislodge Maduro from power. After the operation, President Donald Trump publicly stated that the United States would run Venezuela for the time being, a remark that drew immediate backlash and alarm across the world. Administration officials later sought to clarify the statement, saying it did not mean permanent occupation or colonial-style control. Instead, they described a temporary transitional role in which the U.S. would oversee security, coordinate humanitarian assistance, and help establish conditions for a new political order. According to U.S. officials, the ultimate goal is to organize internationally monitored elections and return authority to a Venezuelan government viewed as legitimate by the international community. Oil has loomed large in the background of the crisis. Venezuela possesses the world's largest proven oil reserves, yet years of mismanagement and sanctions have severely reduced production. U.S. officials have openly discussed the need to stabilize the energy sector as part of rebuilding the country's economy, a point that has fueled accusations that the intervention is motivated as much by strategic and economic interests as by concerns over democracy and crime. Supporters of the U.S. action argue that reviving Venezuela's oil industry can help fund reconstruction and ease global energy pressures, while critics warn it risks turning the country into a protectorate serving foreign interests. International reaction to the U.S. move has been sharply divided. Several governments condemned the operation as a violation of international law and a dangerous precedent, warning that forcibly removing a sitting head of state undermines the principles of sovereignty enshrined in the United Nations Charter. Others, particularly some opponents of the Maduro government, cautiously welcomed the development, arguing that years of authoritarian rule and economic ruin left Venezuela with few remaining options. Legal experts have raised serious questions about the basis for the U.S. action. While the administration points to criminal indictments and national security concerns, critics argue that these factors do not automatically justify military intervention without explicit authorization from Congress or the United Nations Security Council. Comparisons have been drawn to past U.S. actions in the region, including the 1989 invasion of Panama, when U.S. forces captured Manuel Noriega on drug trafficking charges, a precedent supporters cite and opponents reject. Inside Venezuela, the aftermath has been marked by uncertainty and fear. Officials loyal to Maduro have denounced the U.S. action as an act of aggression and insist that Venezuela's constitution remains in force. Conflicting claims of authority, sporadic protests, and concerns about further violence have deepened anxiety among a population already exhausted by years of crisis. Ordinary Venezuelans now face an unclear future as they wait to see whether the promised transition will bring stability or plunge the country into further turmoil. The United States insists its role will be temporary and focus on restoring order, combating criminal networks, and helping Venezuelans rebuild their country. Whether that promise will be honored, and whether the international community will accept Washington's justification, remains uncertain. What is clear is that the intervention has fundamentally altered Venezuela's political landscape and reopened a painful chapter in the history of violates Latin American relations, with consequences that are likely to be felt for years to come.